Hi, everyone. I'm Aileen Christensen here in Amsterdam, Marketing Manager for Scopus. So before we kick off this webinar, I can just see that the number of participants is increasing at the moment. So we'll give everyone about another minute to join the webinar before we kick everything off. Okay, we seem to be steadying off in the amount of participants that we have, so let's get this started. So as I mentioned, my name is Aileen Christensen. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Scopus. I'm based in Amsterdam, and today we're going to be discussing understanding author profiles and getting the most out of the new redesign of the author profiles. In a few minutes, I'm going to hand it over to Scopus Product Manager Isabel Butt, who will be today's presenter. Then at the end of the webinar, I'll be back to provide our presenter with some of the questions from the audience. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a few little housekeeping tips and tricks before we get started. Just so you know, everyone has been placed on mute, obviously, except for the presenters. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A section so that we can either answer them live, because we have two other people helping out as well, or we'll save them till the end and we'll read them out to Isabel so that other people can hear your questions as well and learn from it. The session today is being recorded, and the resources as well that we'll be providing throughout the presentation we'll be sending to everybody. So we'll pop some of them in the chat, and then some of them will come in a follow-up email in about 4 days' time as well. Next slide. Okay, so just a bit of an overview of what we're going to be presenting. First up, I will be introducing the actual presenters. Then after that, we'll be giving a quick introduction to Scopus and the power of Scopus data. We'll give an overview of the value and power of the Scopus author profiles as well. We'll give you some guidance on finding your way around the newly redesigned Scopus author profiles, although it should be pretty self-explanatory with the new clean design as well. And then we'll give you some quick user tips, such as checking and curating your profile, how to use topics to uncover an author's expertise, and several other things as well. And then for the coming up next, we'll be sharing a bit about what's coming up in the future for the Scopus profiles, as well as just the general Scopus roadmap as well, so stay tuned for that. And then, as I said, I'll be back at the end to share some useful resources, like some tutorials that we have, some quick PDFs where you some guidance like that, and some presentations, and we also have some video tutorials. And then we'll answer all the questions at the end as well. So Isabel, just next slide. So as I said, quick introduction to all the presenters. So the primary presenter here is Isabel. So she's the Scopus product manager, and she's been working in this role for the past 6 months and is primarily responsible for the redesigned author profile pages. Prior to working on this, she worked in strategy for Elsevier's parent company, Relics, and she's also worked as a strategy consultant. So, and the other people on the right-hand side, you can see Martin Edling Anderson, who is Principal Product Manager at Scopus, who just waved. And then we also have Andre, who is dialing in from Russia, I believe, who's a lead product manager for Scopus as well. And then there's me, as I said, down the bottom. So we'll be in the background helping out with any sort of questions. So without further ado, Isabel, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thanks, Aileen. So I wanted to start off with a quick introduction to Scopus, as I know some of you might be new to Scopus. So what is Scopus? Scopus is a source-neutral abstract and citation database. It delivers a comprehensive view of research, letting you track, analyze, and visualize research data from 5,000 different publishers. It covers 80 million items from journals, books, conference proceedings, and trade publications across 16 million author profiles and 70,000 institutional profiles. All of this comes together to help researchers in a number of ways. So it's helping you to stay abreast with current publications, look at which journals to publish in, track and monitor global trends, and also find collaborators. Today, I'll be focusing on the author profiles. So firstly, what are author profiles? Author profiles are unique representations of an author with identifiers such as the ID number and affiliation, details on their publications, citations of their outputs, and also Orthometrics like H-index. So why is it useful for abstract and indexing databases like Scopus to have author profiles? Well, author profiles are an opportunity for researchers to showcase their work. They might be showcasing to research admins, to funders, and also to other researchers. And this can be really useful in hiring or promotion, or in attracting funding or looking for collaborators. The other part of this is that they're useful for evaluation of researchers, so by research staff, funders, and also fellow researchers. So why is Scopus author profiles particularly useful? Scopus author profiles are built on a really leading data set. As mentioned, Scopus covers nearly 80 million documents, including 9.5 open access documents, with 10,000 items added every day. The coverage in our profiles and our data sets is multidisciplinary, so it's across physical sciences, health sciences, social sciences, and life sciences. On top of this, we've got really accurate linkages between our scholarly information, and we capture 1.7 billion citations. The quality and coverage of our dataset is governed by the Independent Content Selection Advisory Board. So the CSAB, as we call them, is an independent board of subject experts all over the world. They review about 3,000 titles per year for inclusion and accept roughly half of them. And they're independent of Elsevier. Elsevier's content makes up about 10% of the content in Scopus. All of this means that we've got a solid base to build accurate and complete author profiles. So on top of the accurate data that I've just taken you through, we've invested in linking and matching technology to build our profiles. Let me give you a bit more information about how we actually build them. So Scopus author profiles are built from the bottom up based on Scopus documents. An author profile is a cluster of all author instances belonging to the same researcher. So all of these papers relating to that author. Our institution profiles are built in a similar way. So the documents from a particular institution. One big problem we face is author disambiguation. So there are lots of authors that have similar names, but are actually different authors, as exemplified by the trio of Smiths on the left. But also, the same author might publish under name variations. For example, when they publish in different journals with different requirements, or if they were to get married and choose to publish in their married name. It's made even harder because many of the journals just ask for the first initial. Out of 270 million author bylines captured in Scopus, 60% ask for only the first initial. I've run a couple of searches on Scopus to exemplify the author disambiguation challenge that we're faced with. So if you were looking for a researcher called Olivier Bernard, you'd have 30 author results to contend with. Whereas if you were looking for research by an A. Williams, and this was how they were identified, you'd have more than 6,000 results to contend with. And if it was an S. Chen you were looking to find the research of to understand the different research they'd done and what they were focusing on, you'd have more than 25,000 results. Hopefully this shows the challenge we're faced with. Without technology to group papers and identify papers by an author, you'd need a lot of creativity to run a search and identify all the research by a specific author and just the research by this author without accidentally picking up research by somebody else. We address these challenges in Scopus by using both a powerful algorithm and user feedback to create our profiles. The algorithm groups papers to a profile with a high degree of accuracy based on matching name, email, affiliation, subject area, citations, and co-authors. It benefits from accurate citation links and institution profiles that we've got in Scopus. The second part of this is the author feedback wizard. So we give authors the opportunity to request manual updates via our author feedback wizard. We'll give you some more details on how you do this later, but combining the algorithm and the user feedback helps us pull together really accurate profiles. There are also some additional elements we use to further increase the accuracy, like the 16-digit ORCID ID number, which can be linked to an author's profile. So pulling this all together, it means we create really accurate profiles. And given the accuracy and quality, lots of organizations rely on Scopus and our profiles to make research decisions. For example, the National Funding Agency for Science and Tech in Portugal used Scopus Author Profiles for a 5-year review of 324 R&D units and more than 15,000 researchers. Scopus Author Profiles are a key building block for researcher-focused evaluation and supplying researcher metrics. So now I wanted to give you a quick orientation to our recently redesigned profiles and why we did the redesign. So why did we redesign the pages? Well, we do a lot of surveys that you'll see on the product itself and also conduct a lot of user interviews. In this process, we got feedback that the author profile pages could be further optimized. We heard that sometimes the data felt a bit scattered around the page and navigation wasn't as intuitive as it maybe could be. We also heard you wanted an easy overview of author performance and fast access to the detail. This led us to redesign the page. So what's changed? Well, we created a compact assessment of the author, so you can quickly see all of the information about an author that you might need at the top of the page with a quick snapshot overview. We've also made it easier to edit your profile, add authors to a list, and export to SciVal by moving these commands to the top of the page under the name and grouping them all together. Lastly, we provided fast access to the detail, moving the main sections on the page higher up, so you can get to documents, citations, co-authors, and topics. This is also part of a broader redesign to optimize the user experience on pages you use a lot. So we'll be soliciting more feedback so we can really integrate this and make sure we're delivering the best user experience. So now, before we move on to author profile tips, I wanted to ask a quick poll, and hopefully Eileen can be launching it now. And what we wanted to poll you on is the kind of information you're most interested in seeing when you look at your own author profile. So what's important to you when you're looking at your own author profile, if you have one, and what kind of information would that be that you'd want to see? Okay, cool. So the big results are in, and it looks like thinking about your own author profile, and conscious, of course, not everyone necessarily has one, but thinking about having your own profile, it sounds like the metrics are overwhelmingly important. 80% of you are saying metrics. Also, it's important to see your documents, and it seems like you're pretty interested in visualizing your output. So by subject, by type, and also seeing suggested publications. And as we work to improve the product, we'll definitely take all of this on board and probably supplemented with more user feedback so that we can make sure we're showing the things that are most important to you. So thanks for that. Okay. So now on to author profile tips. I'm going to give you a few tips about how to make the most of the redesign and make the most of your author profile. So first, starting with navigating to author profiles. You can navigate even to author profiles by searching by name or ORCID ID on the author tab of the Scopus homepage. This is shown here. So you select author and then put in the name or the ORCID ID and hit search. You can also find an author profile by conducting a document search on the homepage and then selecting an author from the results list. So that's selecting author in the middle there, or indeed selecting it from the left-hand panel where you can filter by a specific author or click to preview that author and follow links to an author profile page from here. Once you've arrived at your author profile page, you see an overview of an author, their metrics, and an opportunity to make updates. So at the top, you can see your preferred name, the option to connect your ORCID ID, your affiliation, and also the option to show more information, which flags up your affiliation history and subject area. Down here, if you see anything can be more accurate, you can make a request for edits. You can also add alerts for when a document by this author is added, or if they receive citations. You can also look at potential author matches and export to SciVal. Next, down here, we have your documents and your citations, as well as your co-authors and areas of expertise. First, I wanted to talk about metrics and author analysis tools, given these can be critical in showcasing research performance and also in evaluating other researchers, say if you're looking for a collaborator or trying to find a potential peer reviewer. The author profile page has a number of features to help you analyze an author's performance. So here you can see the total documents and citations over time, as well as the H-index. We've developed some additional tools to help you analyze an author's performance. These are the H-index graph down here, analyze author output, and the citation overview tracker, as well as an easy link out to SciVal to export for further analysis. So I wanted to take you through the author metrics and tools we've developed. So the first one was the H-index graph. So H-index is a measure of both productivity and impact of published work of an author. This chart maps published documents in descending order against the citations they've received. The points where the lines intersect is the H-index. You can change the date range, exclude self-citations and citations from books on this chart, and you can also download the H-index information. The next tool is the Analyze Author Output. So this is a collection of in-depth and visual analysis tools designed to give you a better picture of an individual's publication history and influence. It might be useful if you wanted to showcase your experience in a particular field, or find a collaborator with a particular focus, or say you wanted to compare two candidates. You can see output by subject, by year, and by type. So say review paper versus editorial paper. You can also see citations and co-authors from this panel. And again, you can export or you can email these cards and panels and also the data. And the last tool is the citation overview tracker. So this is an adjustable graph and table that includes the number of times each document has been cited per publication year. This might be useful so you can drill into the impact of an author's work. And you can again update this to exclude self-citations. So moving on from the metrics, another piece of important information in the profiles is the affiliation. Affiliations in Scopus are the connection between authors and institutions. So they're extracted from published documents and show the institution the author was affiliated with when they published a document. So your current affiliation is based on your most recent publication, and this could be different from your current employment. And this is one we get a lot of questions about, so I wanted to really emphasize this. You can get to your full affiliation history by clicking on Show All Author Info, which is highlighted here. Then it brings you up a full list by year. As well as where an author works, which subjects they work in are important. So in Scopus, we use topics to show this. So a bit of context on topics. A topic is a collection of documents with a common focused intellectual interest. They're created by clustering the citation network over Scopus content. And there are nearly 96,000 global research topics based on the citation patterns. Every article is assigned to one topic, and this is done by assigning it to the topic that best kind of meets the article and reflects the full article. These topics are also dynamic, so over time they can change, new topics can spring up, old topics can become dormant. So how are these topics represented in Scopus? You can see the top 3 most contributed topics at the top of the page on an author profile. You can also see more detail with the full list of topics an author contributes to lower down the page. This also shows the number of author documents and field-weighted citation index. These may be useful to give an indication about what kind of subject area an author works in, and also how they're contributing to these areas. You can drill down even further on a specific topic by clicking on the topic's name. This then springs up a totally new panel which shows representative documents, which are basically publications that are strongly linked with the topic and often highly cited. It also shows you the top authors in the topics, has quite a neat key phrase analysis, and you can see the author's documents in this specific topic. You can also analyze topics further in SciVal. Next, we wanted to talk about how you can personalize your own experience in Scopus. So you can create alerts to keep track of an author, and this is what you can do if you're a logged in user. So you can do this from the author profile page and set an alert, and this means that you can then ask for notifications when new documents appear by this author, or if the documents of that author receive citations. And you might want to set an alerts from your own author profile page. So if you wanted to find citation alerts, or maybe of an author you're interested in collaborating with, or an author you work with. Another way you can personalize your experience on Scopus is creating lists of authors. So you can create lists of authors, say you wanted to make a targeted list for a future project that you're thinking of working on, or you wanted to follow a particular research group or subject area. So the ways you can add authors to the list are as follows. So firstly, from the author results page, you can add authors to the list, and this is what's shown here as number 1. You can also add authors to the list from the author details page, which is another way that you can do it. And lastly, you can add authors to the list from the co-authors tab, which brings up a list, and then you can add them in the same way. You can also add authors to a list when you're looking at potential author matches. So author profiles that should be grouped together, which we talk a bit more about later. So once you've added some authors to a list and created that list, you can access your list here. So wanted to flag this as we've had questions on how do I find my lists once I've made them. They're in your initials. So in that little logo at the top where it gives your initials, this is what you click, and then you can navigate to saved lists. Then once you're in the saved list, what can you do? Well, one thing that can be quite useful is grouped analytics. So once you're on your saved list, clicking analyze shows you metrics for the whole group of authors. So the metrics that you can see here, once you've clicked on analyze, are you can see the group documents, you can have a look at total citations, see the group references, look at the co-authors of the whole group, and look at the grouped H index. So now we've explained to you different elements of your profile and how your profile might be useful to look at other researchers and yourself. You might wish to edit your own profile if you've got one and make sure it's absolutely as up-to-date and accurate as it can be. So you can edit your profile in 3 places. Firstly, from the author details page by clicking on edit profile, which was shown in one of the slides a bit earlier. Secondly, from the author search results page. So if results come up that should actually be the same author, you can click on them and click request to merge authors. And lastly, straight from the author feedback wizard landing page, which I'm providing the URL of here. So these different editing profiles take you into our author feedback wizard. So in the Scopus author feedback wizard, which is all about making changes to a profile, you can request a number of changes. So firstly, you might want to request mergers. So this is about combining 2 or more author profiles. You might also want to request splits. So that's about separating out articles from an author profile. Another thing you might want to do is request content that you think is missing. And it should be noted on missing content that it has to be content that is indexed in Scopus and covered in our content coverage guidelines. You might also want to request overrides of profile information. So if you have a preferred name, email, or a latest affiliation you'd like updated. You can request these edits on your own profile or on behalf of someone else. First, we verify the decision and then attempt to make the changes as quickly as possible. We're also developing some training material to walk you through each step of the author feedback wizard. So now we've covered tips about your author profiles, we wanted to talk about what's coming up next for Scopus Author Profiles. So firstly, we are adding preprints. So a quick reminder of what preprints are. Preprints are versions of scholarly papers that precede publication. So they're at the composition stage or are ongoing research. So why are we adding preprints? Well, preprints can be useful in a number of ways. So firstly, you might want to look at preprints to assess if other researchers are doing cutting edge innovative research. So maybe you want to check if they'll make a great collaboration partner or someone at the cutting edge to exchange ideas with. Another reason they're useful is to get a more comprehensive overview of a researcher's portfolio, including what they're working on right now. Another useful way preprints can be used is for funding agencies. So funding agencies can use preprints to assess funding applications and also monitor how their projects are getting on. And this can be really useful for them getting an early indication. And lastly, useful for authors to help widen the opportunity to receive comments, as this then might mean you get to a better final product. So in terms of how we're adding preprints, we're enriching about 1 million author profiles this year with adding preprints, and then going up to 1.4 million author profiles enriched by Q1 2021. Initially, when we add them to the author profiles, they're not going to be added into the Orthometrics or the citations, so they won't affect that top metrics panel on the author profiles. Another development for author profiles that's coming up is awarded grants. So awarded grants are going to be added to the profiles for a number of reasons. So firstly, awarded grants provide interesting early identification of the focus of a researcher's work or their interest in a particular field. And they also provide an insight into success with a particular funder. And lastly, they might be useful in assessing a potential collaborator. We're going to be adding grants from about 800 or more than 800 funders, so such as NSF, and we'll be adding these by around H2 next year. And again, much like the preprints, when they're added to Scopus, they're going to be separated from published content. So watch this space on awarded grants. Next, I wanted to introduce you to some ideas that are on the horizon for us. So things we're thinking about and wanted to get your input on. So these are fairly early stage ideas, and our plan is for me to walk through them quickly and then for us to launch another poll. So get ready on this one. So first idea was around enhanced analytical capabilities. So the plan here is to add facets and responsive metrics. So when you're on an author profile, you'll be able to filter it, say by year, maybe also by type, so including open access, or potentially by a particular institution. So different ways to filter down and interact with the results on the author profile pages. That's the first one. So the second one is all about mobile. So we know the author profile page is viewed on mobile sometimes, and perhaps it's not quite fully optimized yet and it has some room for improvement here. So we were thinking about looking into optimizing the page further for mobile and maybe having a more portable author card that makes it super easy to see an author profile on the go, and maybe that's your own profile or someone else's, but trying to optimize that further. The next one is all about providing a tailored view for your own profile compared to another researcher's. So if you have a profile, perhaps you want to see different metrics, or you want different visualizations, or you want to see alerts more readily. And that's different to the way you'd like to see a view when you're looking at another researcher's profile. So tailoring that. The next one is providing you easier alerts and updates about researchers you follow. So maybe there are certain researchers of particular interest, and giving you the opportunity to track these researchers more easily and more clearly and see kind of how their profiles are changing. And lastly is our Scopus Researcher Finder. So this idea is all about how we can suggest you the right people to look at based on either a text input or maybe based on an article you're reading, or maybe suggesting similar researchers to yourself or similar researchers to someone you collaborated with. And then we'd be able to suggest you researchers to collaborate with or read the work of. So that's the Scopus Researcher Finder idea. So now I've run through those, I'm hoping Eileen could launch poll 2, and we can have a couple of minutes to poll and get your input on which of these ideas seem most interesting to you. So we'll take a couple of minutes. I might have a sip of water. Okay, so hope the votes are coming in, hopefully.
Yeah, they are. I'm not sure if you can see it, Isabel, sorry.
No, I can't. I can imagine.
Okay, I'll have to share it with you at the end. Okay. I think people are taking a little while.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, take your time.
Okay, we've hit 108 people, so I feel like this is long enough. So I'll finish the polling, and then can you see the results there?
I can indeed. That is good. Cool. So it looks like the winner here is the analytical capabilities. So that's the facets and the responsive metrics. So it seems like there is a real need for this. And also the Scopus Researcher Finder. So suggesting you those experts. And also some appetite for the My Profile versus another researcher's views, and maybe on alerts, but it seems like mobile is not the big winner here. Okay, cool. Thanks for that.
No problem.
So next, we wanted to give a roundup of what's coming next on Scopus more broadly, no longer focusing just on author profiles. So one thing that's coming up is the UN development on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN SDGs, for anyone who doesn't know, are a collection of 17 interlinked goals and about 169 associated targets. These are designed as a universal call to action about ending poverty, protecting the planet, peace, prosperity. So all, of course, very important things. They're adopted in 2015 as part of the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And researchers have been under pressure to demonstrate how much they're contributing to the SDGs. Therefore, we worked with the research community to define and understand how research supports the SDGs. As part of our work here, we developed a Scopus search query for each SDG. And you can actually get to this from the Mendeley data platform or our portal. And users can already use Scopus search to explore the publications. But what we're doing here is making it easier to use these. So we're adding them as predefined queries in our advanced search. So this screen shows the advanced search. And over here, we're adding the UN SDGs as a query, so it'll make it even easier to query the data set, and analyze how publications are contributing to SDGs. And we're adding this in December, so hoping to get it in before the end of the year. Okay, and the next one, what else is coming up on Scopus for the rest of the year, apart from the author profile highlights and SDGs? So what's coming up on our roadmap kind of falls into these different buckets. So firstly, improved assessment capabilities. So we're trying to improve full text download capabilities. We're redesigning our abstract pages. We're adding open access filters, which we know is going to be quite useful. And we're also putting Scopus view counts in, so you can see which articles are getting the most interest on Scopus. The next tranche of improvements that are coming in are about the API. So we've redesigned the developer portal. We're putting the same view counts that are coming onto the profile into the API. And we're also working on improving our training on the API. The enhancements to researcher profiles, of course, are priority, and I've already walked you through the redesign and the preprints. which are the improvements this year here. The next one that's on the roadmap, the next chunk, is all about strengthening integration across the product portfolio. So it's all about interoperability with our other products. So this year it's about institutions, so making sure they are aligned across Scopus and Cyval. And in addition to all of these, we are expanding our content. So continuously expanding content types. So adding new stuff like the awarded grants and preprints, and continuously working on content types we have in the platform. So the journals, conference, abstracts, books. Next, of course, we continue to work on our author profiles and institution profiles to make sure they are as accurate as possible. And lastly, we're improving our performance, so making continuous page load performance improvements. So that is what's on the cards for this year. And then lastly, moving on to what's coming up next year in these same buckets. So again, we start with improving the assessment capabilities on scopus.com. So in terms of what this is about, we're going to improve the tracking of publication and citation activity within the research topics that I mentioned. So these are the topics that we're showing on your author profiles, where we showed the 3 most contributed topics, but we want to improve tracking of publications and citations in these. We're also going to add more advanced view count metrics. We also want to put on an ability to filter by corporate publications and flexible analytics in the document results page. The next focus will, of course, be enhancing the researcher profiles. And this harks back to the awarded grants piece that I talked about earlier, and also further increasing preprints. Further out from this, we plan to add a couple of new content types for more comprehensive researcher performance assessment. So we haven't decided what those will be, but we've got some interesting ideas, and we'll be looking at which ones of those are going to be most useful for you. We're also looking at how we can add visualizations for the author network. So how can you see who you're connected to and who might be kind of within your network, but you don't yet know. And we've seen some interest about how that will be useful for researchers. Flexible analytics are also on the cards. The next thing, again, the API, continuous focus on this and view counts here, as well as a developer portal. And then the integration across the product portfolio. So I think part of this will be the finding similar researchers idea that we had you vote on earlier. And we're also looking at aligning on subject level classifications, so the topics. And again, we'll continue to expand content, improve profiles, and improve our performance. So I think that is all from me, and I'll hand over to Eileen, who I think now we've come to the end of the bulk of the content in the webinar. We'll launch a quick poll so we can understand what it is you'd like to learn more about in future webinars, so that we can really tailor what we deliver to you in these sessions. And then she'll also talk you through additional resources.
Yeah,
Thanks
perfect. Okay, let's launch this one. So there's quite a few options here, everybody. So take your time to read through it.
And I think it's worth saying, if there are things on here that you really want to know more about or would really value a webinar on, you can also reach out to us directly and take other suggestions.
Yeah, and while this is going, quite a few people have been asking about the recording. So we are recording this session. You will receive a follow-up email with several resources in there as well, including some of the links that we've added to the chat, which is why you'll get it in about 4 days, just to make sure that we've covered all the links and anything extra that may have come up during the webinar as well. I will stop the polling, multitasking here. There we go, we'll just share the results now.
Cool, okay, awesome. So it looks like the next things that we'll want to dig into more are the Orthometrics and analysis. So some more details on how we make the best out of these. Also looking perhaps at Scopus content coverage. I know we covered it quickly at the beginning, but definitely keen to give you more details on that, as that looks like that'll be useful, and also more about advanced analytics. So we can definitely make sure we cover these off.
Okay, I'll stop sharing them. Yeah, if you could just go to the next slide then. These are just some additional resources for everybody. So as I said, I do the marketing for Scopus along with a few of my other colleagues as well. So you may have seen me on some webinars before, also with Martin. So just to let you know, the best place to find out with regards to the latest tips and tricks, also latest releases and things like that, really is the Scopus blog. That's perhaps where some of you found out about this webinar as well. We also have a Twitter channel, and we also have LinkedIn and Facebook as well, which we're incredibly active on as well. You can sign up for a Scopus newsletter there via the blog, that little blue button there when you go onto the blog. I'll be sure to share a link to the blog in the follow-up email as well. We have the info site, which is where I shared the link from the CSAB and various other useful resources for Scopus. And then also there are these two guides. So one of them is a short Scopus author profile in 5 steps. So yes, I'll add the links to those ones as well. And the same thing with the instructions as well. So we do have quite a bit of information there as well. We do have some video tutorials, which we are currently updating because they need to reflect the newly redesigned pages. And you will be able to find them on YouTube via our Scopus YouTube channel, which is also where I will host, when we've finished with the webinar, I'll download this file and host it on YouTube, because I know that some people struggle to access it via Zoom as opposed to YouTube. So next slide. Yes, so we've come to the end of the webinar. I really want to thank Isabel for the presentations, and it was great going through all those polls. Actually, it was great to get people's feedback on what everybody thought. I've also been following along in the chat on some of the other recommendations people have made. I was really kind of struggling to keep up with what everyone was suggesting in there, which is why it's good to have Martin and Andre on the phone as well. We have a few questions. We also have a lot of comments. We are keeping all the questions and the comments for later. I'll read out the stuff that's kind of relevant to everybody as well, and we may follow up with some of the other questions as well, because we're not going to have time for all of them. So, Isabel, I will start. So, I mean, the first one should be pretty straightforward. So maybe there's an opportunity to display funding grants for authors.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess this is good. Back to the awarded grants. So yeah, we're putting the awarded grants onto the profiles, and they're coming in, and we're looking at getting them. Yep. So by next year, mid of next year, they'll definitely be in. And we'll continue kind of adding to our coverage.
Perfect. Yeah, and there's I will also add a link to the Scopus blog, actually, where there is more information about the roadmap for Scopus as well. So you can see those slides that Isabel had presented on the roadmap. Another question is it possible to change affiliations in Scopus?
So on changing affiliations, yeah. So you can click to edit your profile, and you can request changes to your affiliations. So they're based on your publication history. So based on where you were when you published an article, but you can request changes to this. And when you request them, they come in via the author feedback wizard, and we first review them to check that they're kind of reasonable. And then, yeah, we can take requests for changes.
Perfect. Another one is, I found my university has 3 different IDs in Scopus. Is it possible to merge all of those IDs?
Got it. And presumably those are 3 different author IDs.
So yeah, I would think these are affiliation IDs. So the institution has 3 profiles. So in the case of that, the short answer is no, because what you have is this is based on the information that comes from the documents. So it could be, for instance, if you have a medical school, you have a business school, and you might have some other part of the institution, these will be captured as 3 separate things. Ideally, what should happen in Scopus is they should all be grouped. They should all belong together in a hierarchy. So that you would have a main affiliation and then subsequent children. If you're not getting that, however, please reach out to us so we can follow up and see if anything has gone wrong with this particular institution.
I'm just going through, so sorry, there's quite a few questions in here. Oh, there's more coming in. Let me just have a look. There is a longer question here as well. So this is from Abdullah, and it has to do with kind of the lag period between information appearing in Scopus and in SciVal. Is there something that you guys can comment on that?
I could talk about that one.
Thanks, Martin.
So the question is around the difference between when data in Scopus and data in SciVal. And there is a lag between data appearing in SciVal, and that has to do with the fact that SciVal processes all the data inside Scopus and calculates the metrics for them. And we're talking here about, I think, roughly 300 trillion calculations that actually SciVal performs. So there is a lag between the two, and that has to do with that metric calculation. However, this should not be a very long one. So we're talking about at most a 2-week gap in terms of difference, but it's usually shorter. But that's at least then you know why there's a difference between the two.
Okay. Let me have a look here. So one of the questions here is it possible to use SciVal using your personal login or institutional login access, or is institutional login mandatory? So that's more of a SciVal question, actually.
Yeah, so if we talk about, so SciVal requires a login, right? There's no free layer in SciVal, and there's no preview version of SciVal. Scopus has a preview version, which is then gives you some abilities to work with Scopus data, but it's not as rich in functionality like the full version of Scopus.
Okay, let me have a look. Andre, did you see any questions in there that you might want to read out?
Let me have a look.
So there's just quite a few questions in here, so we're trying to make our way through them.
I think there were a lot of questions on whether my article is, why it is not available in Scopus, why it is not available in my profile. So I can just give a broader answer to this question.
Great.
Because the first thing the person should check is whether the source, the journal, is actively indexed in Scopus, whether it's on the source list and whether it's actively indexed. And if it is, and the next step is to check whether this article is available in Scopus at all, whether it's published in the original source in the journal. And if it is in Scopus, then it can be just added to your author profile by means of author feedback wizards. And if the article publication is not in Scopus, but the journal is actively indexed, there can be a request to Scopus Content Support Desk so that they index this particular article if it was missed for some reason.
Perfect, thanks. I saw there was also a question, and Martin, this might go a little bit more to you with regards to, since we're now showing topics of prominence so much more prominently on the author profile pages, if you perhaps can speak a little bit to that. I saw there was a question regarding whether or not topics change over time. You're on mute.
Apologies. So yes, topics can change over time. There's Scopus gets topics in Scopus get re-indexed. We look at essentially if we look at new topics or if new topics have formed. And one example of this could be if we go back in historical records, you know, how graphene research originally came from graphite research. So a bunch of papers on graphite research started citing one another around the topic around graphene, and that eventually broke out into a separate topic. However, this is not something that happens to a very small subset of publications on a yearly basis.
Perfect.
So it's very few topics formed on a yearly basis as well as a result of that.
And we can add some, there is quite a bit of information about topics in the support center also for Scopus as well, now that we've been using it quite a bit, but yeah, there's more information in there as well. There's someone who asks if they're able to edit their subject area on the author profiles.
Yes, yeah. Also, there was a question whether a person can edit affiliations, so they're connected. So the person can edit on the information which is available in the publications we receive. So subject areas we receive directly from publications, and we cannot change them because they are inherited from the journals where they're published, and therefore they cannot be changed. And same works for affiliations. It can be selected only out of those affiliations which are explicitly mentioned in the publications authored by this person.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, there's a lot of questions coming in at the moment. No, that's not. I don't know if you're seeing any in there, Martin, maybe.
Let me have a look. Maybe this one is more for Andre. We have a question here about someone who submitted research in a journal that was indexed in Scopus and is no longer indexed. And the person asks if there's any way to solve that.
And the question whether we can add the publication of the journal which is not indexed anymore, or
well, I think the question would then be if there's any way to see why that journal was removed from Scopus, or if there's
yeah, good question. We have at elsevier.com at Scopus content coverage page, we have the list of discontinued sources in Scopus, and in that list we provide the reason for this discontinuation. So normally these are either ethics reason or metrics or REDA. So you can check this list, it's available.
Thanks, Andre.
And another good one that I saw, which I think is probably one that Andre can elaborate on, was how long it takes after you've published an article for it to appear in your author profile.
That's a good question. So normally after the article is indexed in Scopus, it is then enriched with additional data and go through some automatic process, but normally it shouldn't take more than a week to be linked to the profile.
There is also a question about someone actually is asking if they can merge, if they have multiple Scopus author profiles, can they be merged? So that's, yeah, the author profiles as opposed to the affiliation profiles.
Sure. Yeah, that's the functionality available both from Author Feedback Wizard, where you can just select articles to merge, or even the easier way is just to go to search for authors in Scopus on a separate tab. And if your search covers various profiles, then you can just select more than one. And in that case, you will have the link merge author profiles on the top. And by clicking on this link, you will go directly to Author Feedback Wizard to complete the merge of the selected author profiles.
Mm-hmm. One question that I just saw in the chat was about how you can find well-cited articles in a certain area. And I think a good way to do this can be through topics. So looking at the topics that you're in, and then when you click to open a topic, then it shows representative documents in these topics. And these are often well-cited, highly regarded papers. So often those are good articles to look at.
Perfect. Okay, maybe we'll find one more question. I'm scrolling through these many questions we have here. Otherwise, there are questions that we can also follow up with later because there's some quite long questions in here, I think, as well. So let me see if I can find one. There was a question actually about preprints. I know that you already did mention it, but when are they being added and where will they be added to?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of preprints, we're adding some this year. So we talked about how we're adding them to 1 million author profiles this year. So that'll be by the end of the year. Then we're adding more in the first quarter next year. So by the end of that, we'll have got up to 1.1 million profiles that are enriched. And in terms of where they're being added, so they'll be added as a sort of tab lower down the page. So you know where you can navigate to your documents, your citations. There'll then be another tab in there saying preprints. And if an author has preprints, they'll be populated in there and it will show a list of the preprint documents. And you'll also get a record and be able to click on them and link out to a record. So that's where they'll show up.
Perfect. Yeah, so we will add more information about this hopefully on the Scopus blog, and you'll also see it within the product as well once it's been added. So that's often a good place to stay up to date. Okay, so we are getting to it. We're at the very end now. I just wanted to thank you all for your lovely presentation, particularly you, Isabel. It was really interesting presentation. And as I said, everyone will receive a link to the recording. And if you don't worry, I will also add it to YouTube, as I said, to try and make sure everyone can access it no matter where in the world you are. We'll also send out some relevant resources with the follow-up email as well, which you should all be receiving. So hopefully you'll hear from us again soon, considering all the extra topics you would all like to hear about. So thank you. Thanks all for presenting and good night.
Yep, thanks. Cheers.
Thank you, Eileen.
Yeah.